One. And so this is our first lecture, our introduction to anatomy and physiology. And so the first thing that we learn in every anatomy class is the anatomical position. And the anatomical position is a reference or a reference of the human body that we all are supposed to hold on to. It's really your first vocab word, anatomical position. And it's exactly as described here, as you're seeing the palms facing forward, thumbs facing out, right? Because technically these you can make this, you can flip your hands over and they could be facing the other direction. And so this is going to, when palms are facing forward, that's going to be already setting you up in anatomical position. The feet are going to be forward, facing forward, and it's as simple as that, anatomical position. When we are all referencing a body or trying to talk about the body mentally and we don't have a body in front of us, we always, when we talk about it, we have that anatomical position in reference. There are some alternatives to it where you might have heard of the word supinated, which is more common, which means to sort of be lying on your back with your front facing upwards. But even your hands can be supinated. As you can see, my palms are facing upwards right now. My palm is supinated, and pronated would be the other way. But in this case, the whole body can be supinated, and that means to, again, be lying on your back and facing upwards, but you're still in that essential anatomical position. Nothing really changed there. And so anytime I give any descriptions, typically you'll always see a text or what I'm doing in my PowerPoints. I really don't like to just read through it, but I like to describe it in a way that I think anybody can understand. And then I typically like to reference the text that I have, and sometimes I'll always point out very key words that you just have to sort of log away, like right now, for example. One word that means forward is going to be anterior. This is something that you will have to log away and you will have to become fluent with very quickly. Anterior means the front of the body. So as you look at our individual here, the front of her face is the anterior side of her face. Anterior side. And one thing to address is what we're learning, right? Anatomical, we all have an idea that anatomical position refers to the body, but anatomy is a reference to the body, the structure of the body. Is mostly, I'm actually going to leave it at structure, because you'll notice I don't have more here, because this can be the structure of body of a building. You'll always hear a lot of people say the anatomy of a building, the anatomy of a idea, because the word itself implies the structure of things. And physiology implies the function of things. But for the most part, in our culture, in our society, it always will have a more scientific connotation referring to the human body. And then biology, what's the difference? The difference is that biology is the study of life. It's the philosophy of life. Like a lot of students might have not learned this in high school, but biology is actually philosophy. Because philosophy, like what is this? What is this? Why is this? Why is this? Biology answers that function too. Does this work like this? What does this do? But we actually come up with answers. That's the big difference. Well, that's mean. It's more like there's actual ways to test and actually create things and come out with some degrees of truth, because biology, again, is the study of life. And so anatomy and physiology are part of biology. Everything that has to do with life is biology. And biology is a philosophy because it tries to understand life, the only life that you exist in. And so biology tends to be a reference to that. And the reason that it has to be placed into its own degree is because as we branch into cells today a little bit later into the class, is that your entire body, all of this is made out of Lego pieces. That's it. And all those Lego pieces are called cells. Even right now as you're looking at this, you can see this is a cell, 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 and you'll see something similar. They all have some sort of little structure inside of them. except for the exception of this one. This is a unique one. But otherwise, they all have it because they're all cells. They all need that structure in the center to tell them what to do. It's like sort of like their little brain. But this here, this is supposed to be a picture of a fat cell, what you gain when you eat too much food. This is supposed to be a bone cell. This is supposed to be a white blood cell. This is supposed to be a muscle cell, and they all have the same little structures inside of them for the most part, but they all do something different. And I'm going to describe this even easier. When I say the word feline, what animals do you guys think about? Cats. What other bigger felines do you think about? Tigers, lions, panthers, jaguars. I was about to say lemurs, pumas. And then so they're all different types of cats. But you're not looking at, you're looking at a different one when you see it. And even though they're related, and let's talk about that relationship. What's similar? They all have a heart. They all have a stomach. They all sort of mate the same. They all have the same, play the same behaviors, hunt the same almost, traditionally. Same exact concept. Every single one of these is a little animal that does its own thing, but they're next to each other, working next to each other. And so they are all sort of like little tiny, like an ant farm. And the reason that it's important to me to sort of make that distinction with all of you is because I really want you to understand how complex the life is. And I'm going to use this to explain. Your lungs are made up of a different little cell that look almost very similar to this a little bit. And it's a little cell, and it exists and makes your lungs, and just makes overall what your lungs will be, the overall shape. And I can take out one of those cells, like take it out of you physically, like, surgically, take it out, put it inside of a dish with all the nutrients that your body provides for it, and just put it in that dish, and I can grow it. It'll grow and divide, make more copies of itself. And then I can put it in another dish and keep dividing it. And then I can do this for 100 years, and you could be dead, and a cell that I grabbed from you has been growing without you this whole time. Like the second I took it out of you, I took it out, and it had no longer had your conscious choice in it. It no longer was communicating with your body at all, but that little cell can keep growing indefinitely as long as the nutrients around it keep it alive and supply it with food. And so think about how crazy that is, because almost all your cells can do that. And we used to do that in research because I would take out something that's easy to grab, like a lung cell, put it in a dish, and then once I would convert that cell into brain cells that look nothing like anything on the screen. And then so I would convert it to brain cells. Now you're thinking, why would I do this? Is because now I don't have to open up your skull to take out those cells and see what's wrong with them if you have like a brain disorder. I can actually just take out something easy and convert it to your brain cells because they come from you, so they'll look just like your brain cells. So what the heck is life then, overall, if every single part of you can exist without you, but then when it comes together, it makes you, working all in harmony together. And so life is a lot more complex than everybody really thinks about. And so biology is really about understanding that complexity. So sorry for going on that little rant, but it is very, very, I think, pretty just interesting in general. And so some things to learn is that life has with some characteristics. And a lot of these things, you're going to be able to connect it with things that exist in your day-to-day life. One that we just discussed right now, composed of cells, right? We're made up of a bunch of different little Lego pieces, a bunch of different cells. So that's what this picture is here to correspond to, what it corresponds to. You can see now, let me get everything on the screen, that everything is made out of complex structural arrangements. And so you can see that molecules will make larger structures inside of an actual cell. So the cell, this whole little critter here is going to have little components inside of it that are very complex. So they just have organization. That's all this wants to imply. The key word here is organization. They are able to detect and respond to stimuli, right? If you're hitting the floor with a bat, the floor doesn't try to run away, right? That's what we mean by response to stimuli. If I poke the wall, it doesn't do anything. But if I poke some of you, you're all going to get irritated. You're going to move. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be able to react to it. Or even simply, like you smell food and you walk towards the food, right? That's detecting and responding to stimuli. And in your body will work like a thermostat like the thermostat in your house. Like your thermostat is always making sure that if the temperature goes too high, then it turns on the AC. If it gets too cold, then it turns on the heater. It's always trying to maintain this perfect temperature that you set it at always. Your body does the same thing. An easy example is when you go outside right now in the summer, if you were to walk from here to the outside in the sun, what does your body start doing? Sweating. And then what is that sweating doing? Cooling us off. So your body's regulating your body temperature because it's hot outside. So it makes you sweat so that your body can cool down. So that's an example of how your body regulates its overall internal temperature. Internal temperature. Or sorry, it's internal environment. This is called homeostasis. This word implies the balance that your body is maintaining inside overall. That's it. Homeostasis. We all understand that organisms grow. We've all had puppy or some sort of pet that grows, maybe, or we've seen our siblings grow or our children grow, and they also develop, right? They mature into something or get bigger, larger, and that's all we see in living organisms. They also develop offspring, right? A lot of these things will reproduce and create some sort of genetic offspring or something that's connected to them genetically, is what I mean to say. And then they all have metabolism. This word has always intimidated students, and this is simply taking in your breakfast, your food, breaking it all down. We all have an idea what's going on with our food. Our food is going in. We're taking everything we need from it while it's in our body, and then what happens to all of it when we're done with it? We poop it out. And right, so that's all metabolism really is. Metabolism is what happens to all those molecules that you absorbed. What does our body do with it? And so we all have a general idea of what it does. It builds up. When we're building up, that's referred to as anabolic. Anabolic, meaning to build something up, to build the body up. A lot of anybody who's into fitness will know that anabolic is a word to describe to build muscle. So that's why you'll see bodybuilders, typically they're always going to eat after a workout. They're going to have their protein shakes after a workout because that's when they're the most anabolic, because they just stress their body so much that their body is wants all the nutrients to recover from all that stressful workout on the body, and so they want to that's how they build the muscle up. And then catabolic, it's going to be to break down these molecules that are in our body for energy. When you look at your car and you put gas in, that gas in and of itself, when you light it on a flame, that gas is being lit up and it's creating pressure of gas inside. But the key thing here is that it breaks down and forms that gas, and fills it up, the chambers up, causing the car to move. But that gas has to break down. When we put gas in our car, that gives it the energy to move. When you put food in your body, you are putting these large structures inside of your body, all the breads, the cheeses, the meats, all these outside external products, and then you're breaking them down. And that process of breaking them down gives you energy, believe it or not. It releases and creates energy in order for you to actually move. And that's why our bodies need to consume, like a car needs gasoline, you need food, because it's energy. And the reason it's important to understand this in anatomy, aside from the scientific aspect, is for all of you. All of you have to study everybody's different. You all will have to put in an honest, valid effort to study, and everyone sometimes studies hungry. And this is already setting you up for failure, because you will not believe how much metabolism you utilize in studying. And if your body does not have the energy for it, you will not want to study. A lot of the times, because you do not have the energy you don't study, that lazy feeling. Sometimes it's not you, it's sometimes because you don't have the energy for it. And so an improper diet, a diet is important while you're doing anything that's very metabolically demanding, whether it's fitness or whether it's studying. So keep that in mind. And some quick tips I'm going to give you now. Actually, I'll give it to you when we talk about molecules, when we get into metabolism. I'm going to give you all diet tips on a study diet in a way. And so with that, these pictures go sort of with the corresponding topic. And so that's all I kind of just have it here just to give you a sort of an image, because I always feel like these are hard. It's hard to remember text, but it's easy to remember why a picture exists, right? Like reproduction, sperm and egg. So this is an aspect of life, is that it reproduces. We know that we grow and develop, right, from like fetus to baby, and again, maintaining body temperature. Here, that's her word, homeostasis. And so I like to include pictures to sort of help you with the memorization process, because you must know the characteristics of all living things. There are 7. So if I were to ask you how many characteristics of living things are, you should be able to know, I should know 7 things. If that makes sense. That's how you should prepare for our exams. And so, with that, let's move on to some processes that we see on a lot of organisms, but it's a little bit different in different organisms. So we're going to talk about humans. Oh man, why is it doing this? Is there any way that I can do this and keep that other page out? I'll just hold it. Everything's highlighted already anyway, so let's just do it like this. Okay. Larger here. All right. And so if we look at our first image here, respiration, I'll use the pictures. When we look at respiration here, your lungs overall are the way or the means that you consume oxygen. Believe it or not just food itself, your food by itself, when you take it in, would be pointless without gases. You are actually kind of like a plant. Like a plant is always there, taking in sunlight and always breathing in CO2. It's not really breathing, but it's taking in CO2. You're the opposite. When you're outside, you need to consume out here, like right now, here's oxygen, gases, nitrogen, CO2. There's gases flowing in this environment. Your internal body needs the oxygen floating in the external environment. The role of your lungs is to take in that oxygen, and it places it into your body. And on that same note, when you breathe out CO2. Even though it's not drawn here, our CO2, carbon dioxide, you'd be breathing it out. I'm going to talk about this again a little bit more. And so just keep in mind that respiration deals with gases. That's it. So that's every single organism, or a lot of organisms that are alive, need gases from the external environment. Other organisms, like plants, they don't care about oxygen at all. They actually need CO2. They pull CO2 from the environment and they breathe out, so to speak, with oxygen. So they breathe out oxygen, so that you can see that our relationship with them is inverse. They produce the oxygen as a waste. We produce CO2 as a waste, so we do the opposite. But that's still considered respiration, because the word respiration is a reference to the movement of gases. Next, we have digestion. Digestion is going to imply the process of absorbing the nutrients that you consume. You have these organs in your body considered part of your digestive tract that essentially that you can simplify as a worm, like legitimately a worm from point A to point B. But there are checkpoints like the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the rectum. And so that worm, though, it just changes shape at every checkpoint. But it's still a worm. You take in food. That food is going to go down your esophagus into your stomach, then into your small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and then it's going to be feces. But in that process, as it was traveling through that worm from point A to point B, it was absorbing the nutrients. It was taking it out of that tunnel as it was flowing through it, and then it was finally going to be circulated throughout the body. And so the worm, though, it looks like this instead. It's not actually a perfect worm. It starts off as one in the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, these little tiny ones, and then it goes into the large intestine, which make these picture frame, and then finally the rectum, and then you poop it out. And so you can see it's just one worm going through different checkpoints, and different things are occurring at different parts of that worm. But overall, the goal of the digestive tract is to absorb all those useful nutrients from everything that you've consumed from the external world. I like your breakfast, for example. What you've eaten today is going through you right now, being broken apart, and then eventually, in about 4 hours, will turn into poop. And then finally, circulation, which I like talking about at this very checkpoint, because if you look at circulation, look at it overall in the body. It is pipes, a pipe network throughout the entire body. I'm going to use the word vessels instead of pipes. But the word vessels now, you have all these vessels like the sewage system in your body delivering everything you need. And even if you look at this side here, look at these colorful ones here, the blue and red ones. Not too colorful, but two colors here. That if you look at them, look at the area that they encompass. What organs did we just talk about sit here? What's that first one part of the stomach here? Oh, dang it. With the first one, the stomach, what's the next one? What's the first intestine? Small, and then the larger one? Oh, dang it. The large intestine, right? But yes, they're all here, right? So what do these blood vessels do? Is that they're going to absorb those nutrients, and then what's going to happen? They circulate throughout the entire body. They entered circulation, the blood vessels, and then they just eventually circulated throughout the entire body. So that's how your entire body gets its nutrients, is that it has a heart beating all the time, pushing blood through the blood vessels and repeating this process starting this process from the day you're born and ending until the day you die. And so they're closely related. And not just that, what other structures probably sit right here? The lungs. And you can even see that there's a bunch of vessels linked to the lung shape. Here's the lung shape, kind of like this, because what's going to go into circulation at the lungs, into the blood vessels? What do the lungs place inside of the blood vessels? Oxygen. And what do the blood vessels release into the lungs to remove it? Which gas? CO2. CO2. So you can see how closely intertwined all of these systems are together. When you really look at it, right? This takes in gases, this takes in food, and this circulates it around. Very easy peasy overall. And then excretion. At the end of the day, you have to remove waste. Now, this is the part where we have to distinguish between our number one and our number two. A lot of us in our daily lives, when we go to the bathroom, we do number one and we do number two at the same exact time. So it's easy to think, oh, like this is all this, everything that I consumed, I broke it down into feces and liquid, right? Maybe like, and it's all coming out of my body. I'm getting rid of all of it. Everything that I ate, all the waste. But that is not the case. Number two, feces, poop, is made from everything that went through your digestive tract, and whatever you didn't use, whatever either was extra or your body just couldn't break it down and put it into the blood vessels, will leave the body as feces, as poop. And the difference between number one and number two, or in other words, urination, is that urination doesn't care about what the digestive tract really is doing, but instead it's cleaning, filtering out your blood vessels. Because I want you to just quickly step back one more step back into digestive. When we talked about digestive, we said that in this worm, things were being absorbed, and they're being absorbed into the blood vessels. And now let's think about what has to be fed. Everything has to be fed. The brain, the muscles here, the bicep. We all know the bicep muscle. Some of us might know the pec, right? The pectoralis major, the deltoid, right? These muscles, the skin even, needs the nutrients that were absorbed here. So it delivers it. And once these cells, the muscle cell, eats that nutrient, what is it going to do as a result of eating that nutrient? It's going to produce a waste. It's also going to poop. But where is it going to poop? It's going to poop inside of your body. And then, so where does that poop go? Into the blood vessels. And so it's that poop now is circulating with all the nutrients and all the gases circulating. But then you have this very useful organ called the kidney, and it's just filtering. So as blood is flowing into the kidneys, and then the kidneys remove all that waste that your body's produced. And then urine is removing all the waste of the internal body from that was used up all those nutrients. More on that later. I know it's a little bit hard to kind of grasp the concept, but it's important that the take home today is that the digestive tract that when you take in nutrients, feces is going to be the end result of the digestive tract. And when those nutrients get delivered, the cells will produce a waste, and then that waste will be placed back into the blood vessels, and then the kidneys will remove it. And that's what urine is. It's the waste of the cells in your body. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail, and I have these notes here written for you here. Waste removed by kidneys. So the kidneys filter the waste from the bloodstream. And just keep in mind that when we talk about excretion, we are talking about, yes, urination, but also the production of feces, of undigested food. In other words, what we see in digestive is also considered excretion. Whenever your body is giving off anything, that's what the word excretion implies. Circulation, pretty easy. Movement and distribution of gases, wastes, right? The waste will move it to the kidneys so that it can be removed. And also circulating all the digested materials throughout the body. Now, one way to study, or some ways to use these notes, is that when you're actually going through these notes, or even if you're listening to this again online, is that you want to pause the video, or you want to make sure that you can answer these questions by memory and say it out loud. It makes more sense to me that if you were to answer these questions in an open note fashion. That's kind of what I mean to say, is that try to answer these questions as if these were real, like essay questions for the exam, because that is the best way to study. I know that nobody ever wants to hear that as a student, but that's the best way to learn anything, is to put yourself in a position to be able to teach it. And that's what being short answer questions really do. That's what the spirit of them are supposed to do, is that if you can produce a paragraph verbally, or you can write out a paragraph without your notes, then you know it. But if you can't say something, you can't talk about something, you don't know it. Period. And when you go into an exam, or when you're studying, I used to run into this trap too, that you're going through it, and just because you understand something doesn't mean you remember it, or you will remember it. You must go through like a trial of fire, where you just go through things without your notes. Whether someone's testing you, you record yourself going through 3 pages of your notes, seeing what you missed, but you must be able to describe things without your notes. That is the best way to study for this class. For my class in particular, focus on the images I provide. All the text will always be connected to the image. Be able to describe, if I say, describe everything you need to for this image, that would be the best thing you can do for this to study for this class. And then use this to help you guide or create a way for you to understand how you're going to remember it, because that's the goal, is remembering it. How you remember it doesn't matter. You just need to remember it. If you don't remember it word for word like I do, it's okay, but my exams are based off of your understanding, so you need to understand it the way that you like, the easiest way you can. The easiest way you can. And so as we progress here, or as we sort of are getting a little closer into our next segment, is we have to clarify some anatomical terms. I know that anatomy, we have it defined as just implying the structure of things, but overall, the word anatomy implies the dissection or the cutting open of things. That's the word first implied. And there are different types of anatomy. I'm going to hold it. Anatomy. And one of them is going to be gross anatomy, and the other is going to be microscopic anatomy. Gross anatomy implies large structures. Like right now, as you look at these two things here, you're looking at both of these examples. Up here you are looking at gross anatomy, right? Because this is a heart like we sort of saw back here. This was the heart that we saw. And so what we're doing now is that we're sort of slicing it. We're slicing it sort of in half, like a sandwich that you slice in half, and you're looking at it like this. And so you can see that inside there's going to be a bunch of structures inside. And although today we don't care about these terms, you will eventually, and you'll see that some of them just have very specific names. And so with that, that's what gross anatomy is. It's about large structures that are visible by just the naked eye. So they don't require any tool. Sometimes you'll see it called macroscopic, as opposed to the opposite as microscopic, right? Really tiny. And so you're going to need a microscope, or you're going to need some form of magnification. That's what the word microscopic implies, is that you're going to need some form of magnification. There are different types of microscopes, and you will not need to actually know these different types of microscopes. But what I want you to just understand is that if you look at these two images, you're seeing anatomy of the heart in two different ways. This is the gross anatomy. This is the microscopic anatomy, because what this picture is, it's a zoomed up image of this here. It's like if you took a little slice of that and then you took it out and then you placed it down here, and that's what you're seeing. So you can see that without a microscope, though, I would never be able to see this, like the details of what exactly this is made out of. But if I had a heart, and you're going to see later, I'm going to bring you a sheep heart a little bit later into the semester, you're going to see that if you slice it just like this, it looks exactly like this. It legitimately looks exactly like this. But you would never be able to see what every little heart cell looks like unless you use a microscope, and then you'd be able to see, oh, these are the little tiny building blocks of the heart. And so that's an example of gross anatomy and microscopic anatomy. And so I might describe in the exam situations like I say a student used a microscope to visualize fat tissue. This is an example of, what would you be answering? Microscopic. And what's the key word there? The microscope, right? And another key word there would probably be magnification. Okay, things like that. And so gross anatomy, unaided eye or naked eye, very simply is just understanding when you're seeing something from a gross or a microscopic aspect, because you're going to see that in this class, they are closely related. We go over gross anatomy first, and then we go into the microscopic anatomy of everything. So as you approach everything, keep this in mind. When we get into tissues, you're going to see that there's always going to be a moment where I'm going to say large and then small, and that's because large, I'm typically implying macro, and small, micro. And, I say macro and micro, but, it's our first day, so we got to get used to these terms. And then, doesn't frame. And then lastly, physiology is going to be the study of the function and not anything we discuss in this class. Sometimes I do like to include topics that I don't think a lot of anatomy sections offer, but I do because it sets you up really well for physiology, and it's just so useful to learn it with anatomy. When you learn it with the anatomy, you save a lot of time in physio, or a lot of relearning, because you're not going to remember a lot of stuff when you get to physio, but you'll know the spirit of most things. But you'll forget a lot of things. But I feel like if you get it in a little bit earlier, though, it's easier to understand when you see it again. And then my last note to add is, on this image, you're seeing three images of the heart: gross anatomy, microscopic anatomy, and here you're seeing physiology of the heart. Like, it doesn't look like it, but this is a picture of physiology of the heart. You're seeing the chambers opening and closing, pressure changing within. And so this is what the difference is between physiology and anatomy is that you're going to overall learn what the heart, all the names of things, what it is made out of, and how they function together. But you're not really going to learn how the pressure that changes inside. You're not really going to learn a lot of the electrical conduction system in a lot of detail. That's what I mean is I do like to teach this in this class, but otherwise you don't normally learn it in anatomy, and so you can see that it's a sort of a different, very different. It's an important thing to distinguish between the two. And the last thing I'm going to add to all of you, if you have time, because I know a lot of you are taking more classes, is pick up drawing. If you ever wanted to draw, this is the time. You know, I get a lot of art majors in a lot of my campuses because it's a requirement. Because when you know structures, and even in myself, like I've actually didn't ever really drew as a kid, but you know, as I started trying just recently, I actually can draw really well because I know all the muscles and I know where I know what things should look like, and you'd be surprised. And it's a great way to study anatomy, and that leaves me sort of the last little fun little sidebar is that anatomy in and of itself never started off as like, oh, let's start breaking apart the human body so that we can study it. It actually, one of the first drawings we have of it are Leonardo da Vinci. A lot of us have heard of this guy, and he was this famous Renaissance artist, inventor, and all this other stuff. And you know, his dad died in a chair and like in the street. He got ran over by a horse or something, and in his grief, he was so sad. He actually went to the morgue and and then they gave him permission for this, and because you can do this at the time, I guess. And he dissected his own father, and he dissected his own father and learned or created the first drawings we have of anatomy from his father, like cutting open almost the entire body. And so that's where anatomy actually our first pictures of anatomy actually come from Leonardo da Vinci. You can see they're not exact or anything, but they're very close. And whenever he was asked like where did he learn all of this or when did he learn anatomy, he would always say his dad taught him. And so it was kind of like a really fun little sidebar. And you can see his drawings where he actually has. You ever seen that man in that circle in the square? That square actually, if you study what it is, it's actually the ratios of how to draw a person quickly, because it turns out that there are some lengths, like you can break the face apart into 4 equal parts and things like that. So all I'm saying is that if you wanted to pick up drawing, it's a great way to study, and I have handouts to sort of get you started with that when we get to skeletal, and I would recommend it, or coloring and drawing if you're into that kind of stuff. If you want some recommendations for books to buy, I can give you some for those. So it's just try to use drawing or coloring to help you study is kind of just a take home of that, because if you produced something that you learned, and again, if you can't verbally, visually produce what you just learned, you don't know it. And that's true for absolutely everything. And so moving on, little sidebar. And so with that, here now, we are going to start a little bit larger. And I love going over this. I think it's something that's not done in a lot of anatomy sections in the very first part of the semester. And it's an incredibly useful part, is breaking apart all the systems. Because believe it or not, the body is complex, but anatomy is as complex as that it has all of these systems here, these 11 organ systems. These systems are all going to be the highest level of organization that we explore in this class, because overall organism, you are the organism. Okay, the whole human body is the topic, but the class, all the chapters are really going through the organ systems, meaning going through all of this. So this is your trauma for the semester. Every single one of these are chapters. Like this is going to be our 4th chapter, 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th. And so I'm going to torture you throughout the semester in this order if you were curious. And for our first week, your goal is to learn the names of each and every single one of these systems. And you're going to want to hold on to it for the entirety of the semester. It is so useful to be able to break apart the functions of the body and try to have fun with the material, or try to have fun with this part, because if you think about your body has 11 superpowers. It has 11 things that it can do. Every single one of them work together to produce 11 unique functions for the body. And just because they are separated does not mean that they do not work together. And we're going to talk about these in order right now. Just going to take a quick little, like a liquid break. All right, let's get started. And so, our 11 organ systems are listed here for you, but if you have your open with your PowerPoints online or PDFs right now, this is the slide that I care about because it's good for the PowerPoint. And so it's the same information that you're seeing on this slide. Here you're seeing the systems with the name and their definitions. And they're written out for you on this table because I just thought it was convenient. But I'm going to go through them all with these pictures here. And I rewrote some of these here because I feel like these are the easiest ones and the ones I focus on. And so as we go through this, rely on these little flashcards for these organ systems for your first exam. I'll be asking you, or you should know, these organ systems and their definitions or what they do in the body. So let's get started with the first one. Our first one is called integumentary system. This is the fancy word to imply skin and all the associated structures. Integumentary system. Say it with me, integumentary. Yeah, that one's hard to say, integumentary. And what it does is that it is the largest organ in the body. It is your skin. It is the, pardon, what was I saying? It is the largest organ, even though you may consider it just a boundary, but in and of itself, it is made up of its own unique cells, all of them receiving nutrients the exact same way, much like any one of the organs, so it's even considered the largest organ in your body. And associated structures, and one thing to touch on, epidermis is the fancy word for skin. Associated structures are going to be like associated glands, like sweat glands. That's a pretty easy one to hold on to. Another one is hair. Hair, believe it or not, is a sort of a form of, looks like what your skin cells kind of are, but it's a different variation, or they're using the same protein material to make a unique structure. But otherwise, hair is also part of the integumentary system. And lastly, the nails. The nails on the hands and the feet, these are considered part of the integumentary system. All hair, all nails, considered part of the integumentary system. And it, again, serves as a boundary, a physical boundary for physical hazards, and also regulates body temperature through sweat glands. Next, we have our skeletal system. And something that I need you all to log away, and I'm going to have you all log away from the very beginning because it just comes up at the end of the semester, is I want you to, here you have it here, is I want you to tie it with the word calcium. That skeletal system and calcium. Because if we look at our definition, it provides support. That's pretty easy to understand, right? If we look at the skeleton, without it, we would melt like Jell-O, right? Like when people don't have it, they just sort of melt. And so it keeps us up, protects our inner organs, right? Protects tissues. Here, if we look at our thoracic cage, which is just a fancy word for rib cage, it protects your two useful organs. What are the two organs here for gas? Lungs. And what's the one in the center for circulatory? The heart. And so you can see that the thoracic cage protects the heart and the lungs. Hence, here, that's why we have this note. Stores minerals, and what mineral do we care about? Calcium. Very good. You ever hear the slogan, milk is good for the bones? Or it's not a slogan. That was a terrible slogan, right? It's calcium. Milk makes the bones. I don't know. Something with milk makes the bones better, right? We've all seen it in a commercial. That's why. Your bones are a little storage thing. I know that it doesn't look like it, but you know when you need calcium, let's say your body's like, whoa, like your body's recognizing the sensors in it, recognize, hey, there's not enough calcium in my bloodstream. They dissolve your bone like the way you would think, like the way you've seen bone before. Everyone has an idea what bone is. They dissolve it, and then it goes into your bloodstream, And because what bone is pretty much calcium. So when you need it, you sort of break it off a little bit. And when you're storing it, you put it onto your bones. And so calcium. And then it's also the site where we form our blood cells. Just because blood cells are in the blood vessels, they are not made there. They are made in the bones, which is a very cool thing to know. Next thing I want you to know, and check the schedule very quick, and I'm going to see if I'm going to add something right now. And it will help you for your lab exam if I add it now. That's the only reason I'm doing this. Otherwise, it's too much if I don't. Yeah, it is. All right. It's going to be too helpful, so I'm just going to do it now. And so something that we must learn, because you're going to have to learn it for lab in about a week and a half, is that you have the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. What does the word appendage mean? Appendage. Not appendix, appendage. A limb. It means an arm or a leg, and that's all this word means. So this is referring to your arm or your leg. Sorry, I'm writing upright. Let me take it off this so I can write a little more clear. Oops. Nope, dang it. Not any better. Okay. And arm and leg. And axial skeleton just refers to everything along this axis. And I know that some of you might not print in color at home to save on ink, but just keep in mind that on my notes, it's the yellow one. You can see there's a yellow tint on this box. That's what the yellow one is down here. So this whole segment, even the rib cage, you'll notice is considered part of the axial skeleton because it runs along this axis. But everything that has to do with the limbs is the appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton. This, don't worry about for our notes here. You will learn them in lab, but you don't need to worry about it right now. For now, I just want you to know what the skeletal system is for, what it does, and know what I'm talking about. Because, for example, is the heart part of the skeletal system? No. Is the heart part of the integumentary system? No. Are blood vessels part of the cardiovascular system? Yes, good. See, I know we haven't gone over that one, but that's a pretty common one. And so a common one for this one would be the bones are part of the skeletal system. Nice and easy, right? And exactly for this, hair, nails, and skin, what system do they belong to? Be able to just know those. Know them simply. Next thing, we have our muscular system, which in some textbook you'll see as skeletal muscular system. And when we talk about it with tissues, it's even called skeletal muscle, always. Because this muscle that you're seeing on our image here, it can't do anything without the skeleton. All of these are cells, or they are cells, but they're like rubber band cells that they are acting on your skeleton. They are moving it. And so that's why it's called skeletal muscle, because it moves your skeleton. And they do exactly what we all know, produce movement, and they generate heat. This is pretty easy, right? You know, you always see all those crazy people in the winter that are running outside. You know, they have their life together and they're capable of doing that. And so they're capable of running in little shorts and tank tops, even though it's raining outside, because they're generating heat from their muscles. And so try to hold on to that example to sort of help you remember of what it does. And then we all know what it does. You go to the gym and you didn't run, you're not outside in the sun, but what happens if you're really working out? You're really sweating. You're generating a lot of heat. And then they provide support, believe it or not. Your ability to posture up, right, like your posture muscles, your ability to sit up are done by muscles. So they are in essence supporting your overall frame and body. And something not written here right now, but later on you'll see, they protect you because this is right underneath your skin. Like if I were to peel this off your skin, the first thing you would see right after is muscles. And then if I were to peel this off, next thing you would see is not the skeleton technically, but you would see all your digestive organs here. And then inside then finally our skeleton in the back. And so just try to superimpose them together. And that's why the reason I bring that up is because I want you to sort of just look at this image and tie it with all of these. Just visually, as you study all of the definitions, go through each one with this image. What is the function of this one? What are the parts associated with it? Hair, skin, nails, right? Then here you have your bones. You know it holds calcium. Just go through them together. Try to see how they superimpose with each other. It's just a fun little activity to do. And nothing changes. Axial muscles are going to be the ones that run along the axis. Appendicular muscles are going to be all the muscles that act on the limbs. So nice and easy there. And there is the next thing to add, but I'll add it a little bit later. And next, when we go to nervous system, nervous system is going to be what is essentially in charge of, I've been lately getting rid of the word in charge or like in control. And I understand that why some, you know what, I'm getting too deep into things. So the nervous system coordinates everything in your body, and it is essentially your personality, your soul. And I really do mean that, because this segment here is everything. Your memories that you've always experienced, all your experiences, no matter who you are all going to be stored in this space. They might be uniquely stored considering how genetics works and how psychology and experiments work, but otherwise, for the most part, all your entire soul is located here. And also the control for your body is located here. If you look at this here, or even sense things, let's do sense first. Let's say right now that as you touch the surface of your tables, I think most of you are touching your desktops and they're cold, they're black and hard, right? You're touching it here with your fingertips. And are you feeling it here? In other words, are you feeling that coldness here, that hardness here? And I want you to really think about that, because there's no brain here. You don't feel the coldness here. You don't feel the texture, the hardness here. There's no brain here. It's actually sending the fact that it's cold all the way up, sending it into your brain. And then up here, you're feeling that coldness up here. You're feeling how hard it is up here. There's no brain here. It is essentially like an octopus, where you have all these tentacles reaching out, and then you have two directions. You have one going up, like when you sense the sense of touch, and now it has another direction that you can send electrical impulses in the opposite direction that they can connect to muscles. What muscles here? The one that we always flex at the beach? The bicep. And so this brain will send signals out, send it, and tell the muscle, the bicep, to move. So the brain has two directions. Sends out to move muscles, or it senses things. It senses the sense of touch, and it goes in and goes into your brain. And so that's why I have these words here that you should write down and log away. They're going to come up throughout the semester continuously. And so efferent with an E, it means to go away from something. And it means away from something, okay? Because you're going to use this word in every different way. If I say you're leaving the classroom, in what direction are you going? Efferent. If I tell you you're coming back into the classroom, what word are you using? Afferent. That's how you use it. So in the context of nervous impulses, when they're traveling away, they are afferent impulses. When they're traveling into the brain, when they're traveling away from the brain, efferent. When they're traveling away, efferent. When they're traveling into the brain, afferent. Sorry about that. And so one way I do to remember this is, what in the alphabet, which letter goes first, A or E? A. So think of A, E, A above E. And so I always remember brain is afferent, going into the brain, afferent, going away from the brain, efferent. That's how I remember it. And so with that, there's more to add on the brain. In the nervous system, it's composed of two parts: central nervous system, brain, and spine. That's it. That's what your central nervous system is: brain and spine. Nothing else. And that spine typically is referred to also more intelligently called the spinal cord. We all just call it the spine. And a lot of us have always confused the vertebra for the spine. When we look at this vertebra, this is the thing that, we all imagine when we see visuals of people cracking their back or destroying their back on an injury. They show this, but inside of this is where you have your spinal cord, the spinal cord. And the role of the spinal cord is to travel down through the bone and then to send out more tentacles, more nervous tentacles in a way. That's all we're going to call it today. But otherwise, they travel out and then they connect to everything they need to control, which in the first case, if you look at all of these wires, just like the wires of these projectors, that's all essentially is that this is going to be trying to connect to things throughout your body. And one of those things it connects to the muscular system. That's why if you look at it, there's a large connection to the way that the shape is and where they need to go, and they need to go to all the muscles. And so that's an example of sort of how this operates, or how you're able to control all your muscles. You're sending all these signals away, out through the spinal cord, and then through the other outside nerves. Now, what does it mean when you're trying to, let's say I'm looking this way, but really I'm actually looking at all the students on this table right now. Peripheral. And that means you're using the outside, your peripheral vision, the outside view, the outside of your vision. And so peripheral nerves imply everything outside of the spinal cord. So the second you're traveling down here and the second you leave, you become peripheral nervous system. So that's why it's in yellow, and that's why this is in blue. Just keep that in mind, that everything's color-coded most of the time. And so peripheral means outside. Central nervous system is made out of brain and spinal cord. Next one. Now, much like the nervous system, the point of the nervous system was to communicate throughout the body and, again, coordinate these muscles, right? They're capable of moving we're capable of moving all our muscles because our brain is connected to through all these peripheral nerves. And when we look at our endocrine system now, this is another form of communication, but it doesn't rely on connections like with those nervous cells that we just saw, or all those nerve fibers, these nerves that we're seeing. It doesn't rely on a bunch of connections to muscles. Instead, what it relies on is the use of chemical messengers that you know as hormones. And in our nervous system example, that when we talked about the example of if you touch something, let's say you're about to touch something, or you're not sure if something's really hot or cold, or something's just, let's say that we're about to touch something very cold. And you're about to touch it, and you tell yourself, this is uncomfortable, and then you move it away. And I want you to think about what that encompasses, is that when you touch something, a signal, a nervous impulse had to travel from your fingertip, had to travel up, into your spinal cord, and then into your brain, and then you wanted to move the muscle, and then you have to decide, this is uncomfortable, I'm going to move it. And so you activate this muscle, and then you move it away. But I want you to think about how fast that occurs. I touch it. Nope, never mind. How fast is that for a signal to go from here and back up? To go from up and down. It is so incredibly fast. With endocrine, it is not the case. All of this is communicating too. For example, something that we're all pretty familiar and comfortable as far as understanding goes is that sperm is produced in the testes of males, and the eggs are produced in the ovaries of females. And so, but did you know that the brain is in charge of the development of sperm and eggs? Even the period that occurs, that what we all know as the menstrual cycle that occurs in females, is actually controlled entirely by glands in the brain, all the way up here. That means that something that's happening with the system, the reproductive system, all the way down here, is being communicated with chemical messengers up here, such as pituitary and pineal. You don't have to know these for our first exam, but just know that they're part of the endocrine. And so they communicate, and how through our cardiovascular system. They'll place these hormones in the blood vessels, and then the heart will pump and eventually lead those hormones to the reproductive organs. And so you can see that they function much more slower. They got to detect that the fact that they need to be released. They go into your blood vessels, and then sometimes they could take up to weeks to take effect. Take weeks. And so that's why we have here long-term changes. And so you can see endocrine is a form of communication, but it is different because it doesn't use hormones. It uses hormones and not nerves. That's the big difference. And for this one, I'm going to be very nice. You don't need to know any of these other glands. And you should just know ovaries and testes as an example. Those are the ones I'm going to stick with today, or for the first exam. And yes, no testes and ovaries as your example for endocrine. And the reason I like using those is because you can double up, because what other system are testes and ovaries going to belong to? Reproductive system. And so sticking with that, if we look at our reproductive system along that same note, ovaries are going to be where the eggs are stored and where they mature. And the uterus is going to be what serves as the incubator in the case that a fertilized egg makes its way into that uterus. And that's where an embryo will develop eventually into a fetus in that uterus. And so the take home is to know that one of the essential structures of the reproductive system for females is going to be ovary, the uterus, the vagina. That's going to be where the penis inserts, and we're going to leave it at that. The three I highlighted as the examples for the female reproductive system. For the males, which is missing a photo, but otherwise it has the same definition, is that it produces sex cells. In the case of biological females, they produce eggs, and males will produce sperm. And so that's the big difference. Let me write that in. I don't see it in a picture. I see it over here. I don't know why you got cut off on the other side, but I'm going to here produces sex cells, and that sex cell in particular is sperm. And so that's going to be for males. And maybe I should have written that here. Males, am I right? Sperm. And the only one we need to know for males, the two structures, are testes and penis. And we do have to add one more for females, and that's going to be our mammary glands. It's considered part of the reproductive system because that's how young are nurtured, which are an end result of the reproductive system in a way. And the male one's cut off, and I'll try to add it this weekend and update these notes so it just has a male flashcard, but otherwise it's going to say the same things. It's just going to have a picture of a male and have this there instead. But otherwise I'll try to get that updated. So let's keep going. We're almost done before we take a nice little break. And so now when we look at our cardiovascular system is going to be our heart, our blood vessels, and we saw our blood vessels. Now we're going to distinguish between them. When you see the red ones, they are going to be arteries. I'm going to put a little red in here. Red equals artery. And then when you see blue, blue is going to imply veins. And one thing that you want to use here is the letter A to remind you that blood moves away from the heart. So as you look at these diagrams, as you're seeing them, you should imagine yourself red is going away from the heart. When you look at the blue ones, it's coming towards the heart. If anyone speaks Spanish here, what does ven mean? When you tell somebody ven pa acá? To come back, right? To come here. And so vein is sort of to mean to come, and then I'm not going to finish the last part, but vein, to come back in a way. And so Latin, vein. And then the heart is part of that cardiovascular system, but we're all very familiar with that, right? Cardio is good for a heart exercise that gets your heart beating. And so As your heart beats, it transports nutrients through the blood vessels, so it transports the cells, such as blood cells, and all the materials that we learned about today, such as nutrients from digestive tract. We just learned that hormones need to be moving through the blood vessels. We know that wastes are going to be removed by the kidneys eventually. And then we know gases, that the lungs put gases inside of the blood vessels, such as oxygen. And so, on that same note, we encounter our respiratory system. Not going to go over it again, but otherwise, it's the site of gas exchange. That's the big take home. And it's where our blood gets loaded with oxygen. And a unique thing about it, too, it's how we produce sound. The only structures I care for you to know is the lung, the trachea, and that's it. Actually, yeah, we'll leave it there. Lung and trachea. All right, make sure you can identify them those as examples for the respiratory system. You must know examples for each one, and I'm just making sure you pick very specific ones. And now lymphatic. Now this is the least known, the least studied, and the most neglected out of most campuses that I've noticed is the lymphatic system. It's the one that people don't really know what it does. But I really want you to connect this with this. You have a third vessel, the green ones, and these are going to be your lymph vessels, the way you see it there, lymphatic vessels. They're just vessels, just like blood vessels, but they are not going to have blood vessels. They're going to have fluid. And I'm just going to leave it at that, is that and I'm actually going to take this off. I took this off last time, but I'm not this time. It regulates tissue fluid, and I hate this word returns. It should say regulates. Oh, here it is. Regulates volume. Regulates liquid. Regulates fluids. And also, it's also involved in immunity. Defends against infection, which is just simply described as immunity. Immunity. So it does two things. It's involved in regulating immunity, or just involved in immunity, and it regulates liquid in the body, or volume is fine. It also has some organs, but do not worry about it. When we get to this topic, we will address everything. Do not worry. And so let's finish up with this, and then we'll take a break. Is it time for a break after this? Yes. And so when we look at our digestive tract, you do not need to know all of these examples, but I do want you to hold on to a few because they will save you so much time later. And I want you to remember them in this order: esophagus, stomach, small and large, and then anus. We'll do anus because it's easy. Everyone knows that one. Esophagus, I'm going to put a number on them too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I do want you to know these names and be able to identify them on this picture, just like the rest of them, but you don't need to know what they do exactly, like what each one does. But I'm telling you, I'm just trying to give you a head start for the rest of the semester. And so we know what it does, processes food, and also, more importantly, absorbs the nutrients. Absorbs nutrients. And it places those nutrients into what to circulate them? Into what system? Cardiovascular, very good. Which bones belong to which system? Skeletal system. Which one can I generate heat with if I really run a lot with? Muscular system. Which one uses hormones? Endocrine system. Which one's going to regulate volume? Lymphatic system. Which one's going to have green vessels? Lymphatic, good. And which one's going to be responsible, or going to have, nails are going to be part of what system? Integumentary system. Very nice. And those are example questions that you can expect for this segment. So it's not bad. It's just getting all those little details is the nuance. But otherwise, it's a good introduction for anatomy. And so with that, let's take a 15-minute break. Lab is just the next 3 slides together. And so we're going to use our models in the very back, and so I can show you exactly how we're going to ask these things on the exams. We got brand new models, which I'm excited to share with. I'll show you all. And then we're also going to also move on to cells as well, probably more than likely today or next week, depending on time. So let's take a 15-minute break. And there is a cafeteria in this direction. And if you need more than 15 minutes, it's okay. You come in a little bit late. Really, stop the recording now. Make it into 2 parts.